Well, this is going to be a conversation that's very different from any other. And I'm really glad to welcome Teresa and Blair Bass to the show. But before you even hear their voices, I need to just set the context. So Teresa contacted me on email, and we went back and forth because it's clear that Teresa and Blair and I share a lot of the same values, and both have a good portion of our lives devoted to helping couples have more intimacy and whatever that looks like for them. And only partway through our email communications was it very apparent that Teresa and Blair are devoted, practicing Christians. And that became evident to me right away, I have to say. But what wasn't evident to them right away is that I am Jewish. So we are going to go forward into this wonderful conversation. And I just want you to know that we're going to go into realms related to religion and sex in Christian marriages and other topics which I've never addressed. I generally speak about marriage and intimacy with an openness which accepts the deep humanity that is present in every relationship, knowing that the particular form of spirituality, religious practice, and related guidelines leave room for so much creativity, love, and connection, whether you have an explicit set of religious rules you're following or not. So that is where I'm coming from as we proceed into a conversation that I'm super excited to have. So right off the bat, welcome, Teresa. Welcome, Blair.
Thank you. We're excited to be here. We appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your audience.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome. I want to read from your bio because I really loved reading this. The two of you are a Christian husband and wife team from North Carolina. Through one of the valleys several years ago in their marriage, because any longstanding marriage, of course, has hills and valleys, and you've been married over 20 years. How long have you been married?
Actually, tomorrow is our anniversary, and we will be 24 years tomorrow.
Oh, congratulations. Well, before I proceed, any particular way you plan to celebrate 24 years?
I don't know tomorrow. We may go have dinner. I did plan a date night this past Friday and took her out to dinner, and we did dinner and a movie and some other things. And so we kind of celebrated over the weekend a little bit.
Yep. But we're going to plan a big 25th.
Okay, I totally connect with that approach. I think that's the thing you don't necessarily know when you get married, but at 24 years, sometimes keeping it simple is lovely. Well, before I go further, Teresa, what's something you know about marriage 24 years in that you didn't know when you started?
That is a loaded question.
I'm looking forward to the answer.
You put me on the spot a little bit. Oh, gosh. I guess the word that comes to mind probably is patience. And always learning, maybe. I think we kind of early on, you have some, you're pretty naive looking back now, but at the time, you think you got it all figured out, we're all in love and everything's going to be good. And then kind of now, 24 years looking back, I didn't know anything. But I'm still learning. I'm still learning how, my husband thinks and works. And, obviously there is some predictions there, but you still learn. You're still learning, you're learning how to communicate. You're learning how to be a better wife. You're learning, how to help your husband. And so, yeah, that's what I would probably say.
Well, I love that answer so much. And it reminds me and affirms and expands my gladness in interviewing the two of you. And I'll step back and just say a little bit that my family and I, we lived in rural Southwest Kansas for 2 years, from 2010 to 2012. And when we moved there were 40 churches and one bookstore. And within a few months of our living there, the bookstore went out of business. And many, many, many people who became good friends had never met a Jewish person before and didn't realize they had met a Jewish person until we'd already become friends. I know in some cases they wouldn't have even become friends with us if they had known. But be that as it may, I have 4 children, and my older 2 were teens. And so they were involved with the other teenagers there and exposed to all kinds of purity culture teachings. And maybe you'd like to define purity culture for listeners who are unfamiliar with that. I may add my twist, but Blair, how would you define purity culture?
Well, when I think of purity culture, when you say that, and I may not even define it the way you may be thinking about it, but I would define purity culture as avoiding any type of sexual activity, either prior to marriage or once you're in marriage, not having any sexual activity outside of marriage. So that's my view of purity culture.
Okay, well, that's the purity culture that I'm familiar with. But when you say it, it sounds pretty straightforward.
Okay.
No sex before marriage, and once you're married, only have sex with your spouse. That seems pretty straightforward. But as the mother of a teen girl becoming friends with other teen girls, it had a lot more to it, which I could talk about it in terms of the inspiration and the beauty and what you might call the godliness, but I'm going to actually for a moment talk about the shadow side of it, the part that concerned me, which is that one of the main ways, particularly girls, learn to be good in the purity culture is to basically look at sex as sinful, to make it something that they should not desire or think about or be interested in, that to be a girl who is sexually alive and interested is bad and sinful and damaging in the context of a relationship with God. And to have no interest and kind of be above sexual inclinations is the finest way to be pure and then be ready for marriage. And anything I'm saying, I may well oversimplify, but there's certainly some truth in that. And the problem is that then once the wedding takes place, once the bond is formed, those same girls, there's a version of this with boys too, but I'm going to talk about it in terms of the girls, those same girls who have been conditioned, trained, had modeling and been rewarded for completely disconnecting from their sexuality and sensuality. Now they're married and are expected to know how to be fully present and enjoy pleasure and open their heart and open their legs and really be present for what their Christian training has taught them is possible and necessary in a good marriage. And in my experience, I have not found that weddings actually have that transformational power.
Don't. Absolutely. Actually, the way you just defined that, I could not agree with you more. I don't think Teresa could either. And even from our perspective, and again, not trying to keep it Christian, but we started this store for the reason you just described, which, so I grew up in a Christian family. My father was a minister. I've got ministers in our family. So I grew up in that environment. And, even to this day, I believe one of the negative impacts of churches is what you just described. Churches today don't cover the subject. Some are starting to, but the majority of them don't. And if they do, it's all about the things you should not do. So that by the time you do become married, I agree with you. Women specifically, it can be men, but I do think it targets women more. um, you know, they're taught to not like it, to not want to have it, that it's bad, that it's wrong. And then we as husbands get all frustrated starting on our honeymoon night with, why aren't they as freaky in the bed as we want to be, right? And I say this from the perspective of a father. I have two teenage daughters, right, that I'm concerned about. And we do our best to try to teach them that sex is a great thing. It's a gift. It's meant to be enjoyed, but there's a time and a place for it to be enjoyed. So we don't want you to learn that it's bad. We want you to learn that it's great, right? I think, and again, I'm trying to stay away a little bit from the Christian side of it, but I believe even
well,
in the
feel
Bible,
free. I don't want you to restrict yourself. I just wanted the context of the conversation
yeah,
to be clear to anyone listening.
Great. Well, I think even in the Bible, it's extremely clear that you should be enjoy sex. I mean, just reading Song of Songs, right? It's all about drink from my cup until it overflows. I mean, there's tons of imagery throughout the scriptures about sex, and be fruitful and multiply and whatever. So I do believe the church as a foundation, not just one church, but the philosophy of church has played a major part in our society of painting sex to be a bad thing. And so we want to be part of the movement that tries to change that thought, that image, and whatever. And I'll be quiet, let Teresa talk, but because I do talk a lot, I'm sorry. But we just experienced this in our own church, right? We were members of a church, and we don't go promote what we do with our store just publicly, just for our girls' protection, right? For their reputation. But somebody in our church, this happened about 8 or 9 months ago, saw one of our social media posts, and it became this big thing. And the leaders of the church asked us to step away from serving in the church. So you can still be members, but you can't serve here because sex is bad and we don't agree with the message you're trying to send. So it happens to this day, happened to us, it'll happen to others. And I agree, that's a bad message to be sent.
Okay, well, that's pretty powerful what you shared. And I want to just dial out because you referred to your store a few times. So I'm going to go back to read.
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're genuine. And I got so excited, I just spilled my water. So 1 second. Okay. So one of the things in the bio you sent me says, as we continued to learn the importance of God's design of sex and intimacy in a Christian marriage, we found there to be a lot of great resources talking about it, but very few helping us put it into practice. And that is the understatement of the Christian year. I mean, that is so spot on. And I really love that the two of you decided to do something about it. You opened your store. I'm going to ask you more details about it, but just to have all the facts out there, that you have a store called Romantic Blessings, which is a sex toy shop for Christians, or I guess anyone can purchase, but it's a Christian sex toy shop. That's where the Christian part goes.
No nudity, and yeah.
Yeah, so that anyone who's a Christian can be very comfortable being a shopper at Romantic Blessings, because they're not going to need to wade through pornographic imagery in order to get to a simply packaged toy that might really allow a more Christian sex life in the way that you've painted it, Blair. So that's what we're talking about. Why don't you say a little bit more? I mean, how did you get to sex toys? I know yours is not the only Christian sex toy shop online, but how did you find your way to toys, with whatever either one of you is open to sharing about that? And then we're going to come back. I'm going to ask you questions about your church in case any listener had their attention piqued like I did. But how did you go from discovering whatever you discovered in your own bedroom to purchasing and then choosing to sell toys?
I think you could answer that a little bit better.
Okay.
I mean,
Sure.
it was, yeah.
Trying to give her.
It started with him, really. So I'm going to
Okay.
let him start the conversation at least.
Well, and I guess just a quick little background. So in my other career life, because I do have a full-time job, so does Teresa, outside of we do our store kind of on the side a little bit. But my background is in supply chain, inventory management, distribution, wholesale, manufacturing. I do a lot of business executive consulting in that area. So it's kind of my background, has been for 30 years. So a couple of years ago, Teresa and I went through some struggles in our marriage, and as I think all couples do. And we had kind of grown apart a little bit. We were kind of living our own. We were so busy, kids, like everybody gets. I was work, travel. She was doing her thing. And we kind of got to a place where we're more roommates than married couples. We were there, but we weren't.
You and most other couples in the Western world, for sure.
Right. So, Teresa called me out on some things, and it was both of us. But so we decided to go do some counseling. And one of those things that started, she brought in a podcast from a preacher in Georgia that she had listened to, wanted me to listen to it. Of course, I had no time for it, didn't want to do it, but we did, and that piqued my interest. So we started listening to other podcasters around marriage, trying to learn how to communicate and work on our marriage. And one of those podcasters had a forum that if you paid some membership, you could join their forum. And this is where it really came about. The forum, this podcaster talked about how to improve your sex life through Christian marriage and all that. But so I was in the forum, and a lot of people in the forum were like, "Hey, love that episode. You're saying we should try this, but we don't know where to go shop for toys or do this." And so I kind of felt this calling. I believe it's a calling from God that put on my heart, but I felt this calling that, hey, there's all these great podcasts out there, but when people are telling you, go try this, go do this, everybody's kind of saying, a lot of people are saying, we don't know where to go shop to do that. And because these podcasts had helped our marriage, I wanted to do something to give back. And with my background in manufacturing distribution, I thought, hey, why don't we open a sex toy store, without thinking of what all the ramifications of that could be for us personally, clearly anyway. And so I just used something that my background is comfortable with, inventory management, distribution, and a need I thought I heard in the forums. And I talked to her about, hey, let's try this, right? I think we're being called to do this, and it's something I want to try. So.
Yeah, that's how
Well,
it started.
what was your first response to hearing, hey, honey, let's open an online Christian sex toy shop?
Yeah, I would say probably at first it was a little surprising, yes. But we have been wanting to do sort of a business together. And so I was like, okay, if he's so passionate about this, I'll get on board and see how this goes. Because I mean, I agreed with him that there wasn't a lot out there, this type of thing out there for people, to go to. But I do remember early on telling him that I would like it to be more than just a toy shop. Like, I want resources and I want, other things. I want it to be bigger than that. And we have gradually gotten to that point. And so when we went through what we went through with the church, it really almost, put fuel on the fire, for me at least too. And it really opened up my eyes, into that, this is a conversation that we should be having, and there shouldn't be any shame around it, because it is a good thing. To me, it's just over the years of doing this, I've gotten more comfortable talking about it, obviously. And definitely 6 months ago when we went through it with the church, it just really took fire. But to me, I just don't understand how, like, society doesn't really talk about it, church or no church. It's happening. People are doing it, but we're not talking about it. And if we do talk about it, it's talked about in a, sort of a negative way almost. And to me, that really bothers me the most, because we should be talking about it in a really great positive way. And we should be we're talking about everything else. Why are we not talking about that, talking about intimacy and sex? I mean, if it's done in the right context with your married partner, then we should be talking about it. We're talking about everything else. Why can't we talk about this, And especially with young girls and young married couples, I mean, they needed the tools too, they struggle at the beginning of their marriages too, and, if we talked about it more, I don't think those struggles would be as prevalent as they are.
I deeply agree with you. Although one thing you said caught my attention, there should be no shame about it. That's not really how shame works. It doesn't follow the shoulds. It doesn't just go away when we think there's no rationale for it. It's just not how shame functions. It is kind of sneaky, like a silent toxic gas that is hard to perceive and eradicate. However, I love that you're contributing to the conversation this way. I do want to say that as someone who has wanted to be able to serve anyone who wants to deepen the intimacy and enhance their marriage in order to have better sex, in order to have a happier, more bonded marriage and a family life that reflects it, like this is how we create a better, more connected, more purposeful, less lonely society, is having children learn. Like, I really feel like one of the best things I can do for children is teach their parents how to have wonderful relationships. That goes so far. And I know your mission is in alignment with that. And so I just want to say, I know that there are Christian sex toy shops, Romantic Blessings being yours, and the link will be in the show notes for anyone who'd like to check it out. There also are sex toy shops specifically by and for Orthodox Jews and Hasidic Jews, also for Muslims. So anyone who's listening, if you would like a Christian sex toy shop, well, Romantic Blessings is calling your name. But if you have friends, or if you're a physician and you have patients who have other religious practices, like there's a way. I think one of the saddest things is that the porn industry has a monopoly on communicating information, which, regardless of religious or spiritual orientation or lack of it, most of porn is portraying something false anyway, never mind the moral elements, if those are something that are significant. So how do you handle that with your church? What did you say?
Well, that was the big thing that they couldn't get past, is that because to them, we're contributing to the porn industry, right? But, it would be easy to say, like, okay, we'll just stay in our little box, right, and do our thing. But I think we personally think that we're all called to kind of go outside of our box a little bit and meet the people where they are, right? And we're trying to not only, send the message that sex is good within the marriage, right? Sex is great, but we think it's only right within the marriage. And that's the conversation we want to try to continue to have and promote. And, unfortunately, if we could control the distributors, and use the right distributors, that aren't in the porn industry, of course we would do that, but we can't. And so,
unless you become a Christian sex toy manufacturer.
Right.
Yes,
right. Yeah. But that, we don't feel like that's where we,
yes.
But, so
I see. So part of the issue is that by supporting the companies that are making the toys you sell, you're indirectly
supporting when you're
supporting the porn industry. Yes. Okay. That reminds me of.
But we pushed back on and said, well, don't you buy things from Amazon, or don't you buy things from,
China.
anywhere, right? They're all supporting that as well, just as much as we are. So, like, don't throw stones,
Yeah, I liked how some of the leaders of the church, as they're wearing their Nikes made in China, who, by the way, kills and murders Christians for practicing their faith, are telling us that what we do is support our money is, So I think one of the big problems a lot of people have with the church is they see the human hypocrisy in a lot of things. And so, that's a hard conversation to have, especially with the leaders of the church. And, they believe they're right. I'm not here to tell them they're wrong, right? There are places.
Why not?
Well, because there's a verse in I believe it's Ephesians that says it may be legal, but that doesn't mean it's beneficial. Meaning, everything may be legal for me to do, but it may not be productive for me. And so, we believe the sex toys and whatever else is a personal decision between the couple, right? If you believe toys are wrong and bad for your marriage, then they're wrong and bad for your marriage. They're not for me to tell you that you have to do them and they're right. We believe you should be educated about it, right? And that type of thing. But if you want to just throw up a wall and say they're not right for me, we talked about it, whatever, then that's your choice. And if anything, I believe in freedom of choice and freedom of religion, and it's not for me to tell another how to do that. But I would point out that and I pointed this out to our church leaders, that even if you do believe it's a sin, which they obviously did in this case, actually the preacher of the church did not. We told him about this story 2 years ago when we started it, and he was all for it. He wanted to share it with his other preacher friends, and he invited me to become a leader in the church. He invited us to serve, do all kind of things. It only became an issue when another member of the church saw one of our social podcasts and brought it up.
In a negative way.
And then all of a sudden he had an issue with it, although he'd known about it for years. So it wasn't.
I understand. Yes.
It wasn't handled the best way. But my point to him was, again, this is kind of religious, but hey, if Jesus did not come here to deal with all the people that were not sinning, and we're all sinners, so it's everybody. But I mean, if you read through the scriptures, who did he try to go witness to and help? It was the prostitutes, it was the lame, it was the Jews, it was the Gentiles, it was everybody, right? And so he said, be like him. So are we to stay away from the porn industry if that's what it is, because they're in the porn industry, or should we be having this conversation? And one of my favorite things you probably could have said when you introduced us was it was readily apparent to you that we were Christians, and it's not because we were overtly talking to you about Christianity. I don't think we did at all talk to you about that, really. But that's how we feel in the porn industry. Maybe we can just be a light. We can be a seed, and we don't have to talk about it. And the thing that makes our store Christian safe, we believe, is what she said. I don't care if you're Christian or not Christian. There are millions of couples where the wife does not want the husband to go buy her something at Victoria's Secrets because she doesn't want him lusting or fantasizing about the Victoria's Secret models, right? Has nothing to do with Christianity. And so that's what we try to present on our store. Here's a safe shopping place you can come, Christian or not, that if you're worried about imagery and you just want to not fantasize, not have lust in your marriage, whatever, we give you that safe environment to do that.
Okay, so let's say someone's listening. Maybe they've been married for 35 years. I'm thinking of you, if that's you. And they're like, I've heard of sex toys. Where should I start? And I'm wondering I don't know if you have a chat service on the website or not, but regardless, I'm sure, I just infer that you must give good customer service. So if someone asks, like, what's a good starter toy for a heterosexual couple. Do you have an answer, Teresa?
I do.
Do I have an answer?
Yeah, you might have different answers. So let's find out.
We probably do. Well, I would say that we have a blog. We have a blog with lots of posts on there. That would be a good start. There's a couple of good ones on there. And we are always, our door is always open to anybody who wants to ask us questions or need some help. So personally, if they want to, we even have a telephone number and an email, so they can reach out to us that way. I mean, as far as an actual toy.
Yeah, an actual toy.
I mean, I would typically say just a vibrator, right?
The buzz, the famous.
Yeah, I mean, just like, a very basic vibrator would probably be the first.
Okay, and I'm going to push it a little further since we want this to be educational. When you say a basic vibrator, what makes it basic versus not?
That it vibrates. I mean,
You mean and no other functions. It just vibrates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? I mean, there's a long list of other features you can add to that, but to not overwhelm a person, I would say just something that vibrates, honestly. Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful first toy also because it can be awkward enough to start a new adventure in the bedroom and to not have to figure out like what the different functions are. Like you don't want it to feel like a console of an airplane. It can just be like a light switch where it's on and off. So that's another reason that I think is a great place to start. Okay, and what were you going to say, Blair, in terms of a first sex toy?
So her answer is great because whatever she says is always awesome. I support.
Okay, I affirm that.
Just from a resource standpoint, I'm surprised she didn't mention this because she's done a lot of work on this. But we do have a lot of video learning resources on there. We actually have a page called I'm New, Where Do I Start? And there's a lot of videos there that you can go watch, and it walks you through kind of where to start and how to do that.
And they're clean. Everything on our store is clean.
Yeah.
Clean.
And by clean, you mean not pornographic?
Correct.
So, but if it was one toy, I would suggest somebody to start with. If we're talking toys itself, I think there's some other tools I might recommend, but a toy, and some people don't think of this as a toy, but it's big. I would say lubricant. I think it's the most basic. A lot of people already do it. Some don't, but there's no toy, there's no play, there's nothing you can do where wetter's not better, as we say in the industry, right? So,
and do you have like flavored lubes or different?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
We have flavored lubes, we have heated lubes, we have scented lubes, coolings and safe. I mean, we have it, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? I really like that, Blair, because when I'm coaching, I like to start with a step that's going to bring success. And so I know that there are many of you listening where like, of course you'd be comfortable doing this. And maybe you want me to ask what's the most exotic toy at the store, and I will. But there also are lots of people. One could say that marriage is a collection of habits. And if your habits in your marriage haven't ever included sex toys, then no matter what exotic vacations you've gone on, no matter what your degrees, no matter what kind of car you drive, it's a big deal to create a new habit in the bedroom. And I hadn't thought of it before, so I really love it, but I can see how lube would be perfect because you can start by putting it on your hand fully dressed. Like it can be the least confronting, most accessible next move to create new sensations. And then you can experiment with how to make those sensations more pleasurable. So I really love that. And I am going to go ahead and ask, it doesn't have to be the least basic toy that you sell, but what's one that isn't really basic that maybe someone who has a lot of experience with toys and has a little collection in a basket lined with velvet, what might they add to their collection?
Well, my new favorite is the air pulsing vibrators, and the ones that, and I haven't tried it yet, but they heat up as well. So there's new features that are coming out that intrigue me. And one I have tried is the air pulsing. So I would definitely add that to the list if they haven't yet, for sure.
Okay, fantastic, Teresa. What about you, Blair?
Well, if I was answering what I think is the most, everybody loves the word kinky, the kinkiest one out there or whatever. I don't know if it's one toy. I think it's a collection. I've spent the last 6 or 8 months really trying to broaden our toy collection to get people into role playing, because I think that can be a big deal.
Did you say rope playing or role playing?
Role, like,
because they're both pretty great, but you're saying role playing. Okay.
But we have a lot of what people would call BDSM toys. We have cuffs. We do carry one type of rope, but I try to stay away from that, because rope, if you don't know what you're doing, could be very dangerous. But we do have cuffs. We have blindfolds, paddles, crops, whips. We have costumes. We have boots, leather boots, and I mean, and wigs, and we try to, there's nothing in any marriage, Christian or not, where fantasy and role playing between the couple can't be great. And a lot of our competitor Christian stores don't carry that type of product. And so that may be where, to answer your question, maybe the kinkiest things we have that gets a little more into not just vibrators and lube and lingerie, which we have tons of those if you want them. But we get into some of the other more fantasy and sensation play as well.
Okay, I'm going to share something that I recently read about Queen Elizabeth. I have 4 children, and I'm in my 15th year of homeschooling. One is in graduate school, one is in the workforce, and one just started public high school last year as a 10th grader, but I have one at home. And so with my 10-year-old, I pulled a book off my shelf of biographies about Queen Elizabeth to read it to him in the context of her passing. And the book itself was written about 20 years ago. It was, or maybe more, I don't remember, but Princess Diana is just mentioned, but none of the turmoil and challenges that later were part of Queen Elizabeth's life around her family life. Anyway, I don't need to be so vague. I just mean with the divorce and Diana's death and so forth, this book was written before that. And it tells the story of how Prince Philip was on a trip for a few months. And this was obviously before the internet and ways of keeping track of people when they're at a distance. And so rumor came back that while he was away, he had left clean shaven, and while he was away, he grew a beard. And so Queen Elizabeth arranged for her and her staff to all be wearing beards when he came home. And so we know her as this proper, emotionless woman. And that wasn't specifically sexual play, but it's a way to bring like a whole other energy. And in their case, maybe it was into the front of Windsor Castle. Who knows where she and her staff were wearing their beards when Prince Philip arrived with his. But there's something in that moment and the twinkle in everyone's eyes and his confusion and then open-heartedness that is certainly something beautiful to bring into the bedroom. And then I want to tell a completely different story, which is that I had a friend whose child was my daughter's age when in the first few elementary years she went to school, and they were a very religious family, and her husband was a good man who participated as a young man would in purity culture. And when they got married and she was undressed, she is a beautiful, attractive redhead with red pubic hair. And he almost had a heart attack because he didn't know that women have pubic hair. And his not being sinful and thinking about sex had meant that he really didn't know anything about women's anatomy. If he was surprised by pubic hair, we can be sure he didn't know what a clitoris was. And so there's a way in which my heart is just warmed to know the mission and the way that you're bringing it and the people that you can reach specifically because of who the two of you are as Christians. And with that, I'd like to pivot into the question I ask everyone I interview, because right in line with what you said, Teresa, about marriage as an opportunity for ongoing learning, I absolutely believe that intimate relationship is the ultimate vehicle for personal growth. So I would love to ask you, Teresa, what have you learned about yourself as a result of specifically being married to Blair?
Well, this may not sound good, but I think it is good. At least I look at it as a good thing, is that I know I have weaknesses, and I'm okay with that because he helps with those weaknesses.
That sounds pretty fantastic.
Yeah. And I'm okay, like, I don't look at it as a bad thing. Like, I know I have weaknesses and I'm okay with that, but I know that, he compensates for my weaknesses. And I think my strengths, can compensate for his weaknesses. And I think just realizing that I have those, I think for so many years, I may have known I have weaknesses, but I didn't want to admit it or, say them out loud or whatever. But as I've gotten older, I would say that I've come to terms with those weaknesses and I'm okay with that, especially being married to him,
I think that is exquisite, Teresa. Self-acceptance is so powerful. It's its own aphrodisiac. And I love what you've just shared. What about you, Blair? What have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Teresa?
I don't know if you'd say the same thing, right?
That's a deep and foreboding question. As we look to celebrate our 24th tomorrow,
yes,
I'm going to be careful how I answer, so I come to the 25th, right? But no, I would a little bit along the same lines. But I've learned a lot about my flaws and good things about me that I don't give myself credit for, because she does for me. But they always tell you you always hear the fact that you can learn more from your critics than you can your praisers, right? And so I wouldn't necessarily call her a critic all the time, but I've learned I'm a very stubborn person at times. I've learned that I don't always pay attention to a lot of things at time, which I get reminded of all the time. It's one of those things that's like, hey, let's talk. And my mind just immediately zones out. And I didn't hear the next 30 minutes of whatever. And I'll answer with, what did you say? So, learning those things about myself, they help not only in marriage, but they help me at work. Because I know if I'm doing it here, I catch myself at times at work just zoning out of conversations and things like that. So I think, learning how to continually improve yourself and those types of things. And that kind of what she said, we're all born sinful. We're all born not perfect. Nobody is perfect. I don't care who they are. And so I've had to learn in marriage that, accepting things, getting up and loving every day, doing everything, it's actually a choice. It's not a feeling. It's more of a choice. And, things can get bad in a marriage. And the way you stay together is you have to choose that you want to work on and stay together. And so I think her helping me realize some of those things, that I can't just la-di-da go through marriage and life. I have to choose to get over things and do things and work on things to get better. So.
Well, thank you so much for, this has been a really amazing conversation with religious, cultural ramifications, personal ramifications, and sales ramifications. So by all means, click the link, check out their store. If you have questions, reach out. It's clear that both Teresa and Blair are approachable and good-hearted. And I didn't ask you this first, so you can tell me if you want to be a no, but I feel like saying, if you are a Christian and you want to bring this conversation to your church, I'm going to recommend that you invite Blair and Teresa to support you in that endeavor.
We would love to do that. We actually have some resources on our site about how we can partner with churches, public like yourself, other groups. So yeah, we would love that, and we think it'd be great because churches need to be having these conversations.
Teresa and Blair have kindly offered you, my listeners, a coupon code. So when you go to Romantic Blessings, the link to get there will be in the show notes, or you can go straight to romanticblessings.com. Use coupon code IMP, that's for Intimate Marriage Podcast, IMP10. Anything you want to add that's so generous?
Yeah, I would just add, just use that at checkout time. It will apply to your entire order except for a few product lines. We do have some manufacturer restrictions that we're not allowed to offer discounts on a couple of their products, or they'll pull the product line from us. But other than that, it'll apply to everything else on the store, and just put it in at checkout time and you'll get your discount.
Okay, so get your basic toy or get your sophisticated toy, and be sure to use IMP10. Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.